So yeah, this will serve as one of the first kind of tutorials that I'm doing on our Indigenous Emergency Management System, and we've already got a brief overview of the entire system on our YouTube channel. So if you're looking for kind of the basic overview of this, it's that is posted on our YouTube. But for today, I wanted to specifically focus on reserve fire assessments because that's where we get the most curiosity. And that's where we've got people actively testing it right now. Two communities are going through the assessment process for their own nations. And I mean, that just kind of leads us to thinking that this is probably one of the ones that will be most popular because it's also I think the most underrated type of assessment within a nation's emergency management system. And it's also one of the most expensive and one of the hardest ones to get done because of the cost. But I think we've done a good job of being able to reduce the cost for this and help nations maybe go through this initial assessment without having to drop $30,000 and things like that. So when you log into our application, where you find the assessment is on your dashboard. Yeah, Joe, you can take off there, bro. Maybe who should stop lighting the fires? There's nobody lighting fires, whatever you're talking about. Anyway, so when you get into your fire department assessments tab, which again, it's on your dashboard, you just click on that button. And any of the previous assessments you've done will be here, but typically a nation's only going to do one, so you'll only ever see one. And that's your initial project tracking status. And so where you'll start off basically is with the new assessment. And I'll kind of walk you through what you're seeing here at this point. And this is going to be relevant to any reserve. Okay, goodbye, Joe. You can take off. We don't need your racism and bullshit on here. Like, fine, you live next to a reserve. That doesn't mean anything. From now on, I will not be commenting to your comments because it's just useless and uneducated. So anyway, if you have good questions or positive comments, you're welcome on this channel. But people like Joe who like to hide in behind things and be probably a racist moonyow. Yep, see you later, Joe. Anyway, this fire assessment is based off of Indigenous Services Canada's fire service performance tiers. So they have a guiding document or a standard that they've created to guide on-reserve fire service level standards. And we've essentially taken that document with some other core NFPA standards and some other fire standards and wrapped it all into one assessment. And that's what is going to drive this. So within the ISK funding world, they look at 3 tiers. And those tiers are made up of these areas. So you have a community risk profile, you have governance and administration, fire prevention education, fire safety monitoring and baseline indicators, personnel and training, apparatus, protective equipment, fire hall and water supply, operations performance, fire safety planning, and fire response services. All of those relate to a specific tier. And as you go through the assessment, those will be populated for you. So we're going to start in tier 1, really which has more to do with community risk and community education. And as you move along, your status indicator fills in and your overall progress fills in and you get a score that totals here. And that just basically tells you how far along you are in your on-reserve fire service levels and performance. And this is a living document. So I want you to keep in mind, as you go through the audit and data collection, you can come back to this anytime and update it, run a new report and print it off, and you're not having to kind of keep track of multiple Word documents, Excel sheets, and all of this other stuff. So as your fire service assessment changes, as your fire services on reserve changes over the years, you can keep going to input into this document, and your score will be updated, your report will be updated, your priorities and everything. So it's one living document, which makes it really easy. Completing an on-reserve fire assessment within Community Risk Profile. The other thing I'll add to that I'm not going over in this one, but part of the emergency management services in the whole application, which if you go back to dashboard, you'll see there's other assessments here like hazard risk assessment, EM emergency management program. All of the data that you fill into those assessments will auto-populate and cross-populate into this one and vice versa. So again, you're not having to retype everything out. And if your community profile, like you can see here, what is the total community population? That was entered in when you set up your community profile. So it automatically goes in here right now at 3,000. Right? So you're only having to, what the frick here? Let's see here. There we go. There we go. So you're only having to do this one time. It's perfect for that, right? So what is the total number of occupied community dwellings? You get a small hint here that allows you to kind of understand some more info on that question. I understand a lot of nations don't have a lot of data capturing tools. They may not have the data that is needed to fill this in, but you can either try and estimate it or formally go out and get it, right? So you could do this assessment in an hour, or you could do it properly and do this assessment over the course of a month and get very, very clear data. So for example, let's just say you know the number of community homes on reserve. You know, and we'll just, for the sake of this one, we're just gonna put in 400. You could add specifics here. So you could say, in your community, what makes up a dwelling? You know, you could put in, this is made up of, 250, stick-built homes, 100 manufactured, right? So that's 350. And then 25 cabins and 25, shelters. So you can break up if you want and define what a dwelling is in your community. Total community population is pretty clear. Has the community assessed fire risks related to housing stock? Again, homes built before 1980 may lack modern fire safety standards. Older housing stock is a key lead toolkit risk factor for on-reserve communities. You can answer yes or no. Chances are, if that fire risk assessment isn't done, you put no for now. And you can go and do that later, and it'll populate as a priority in this assessment. Is overcrowding identified as a fire risk concern in community housing? Let's put that yes, because often on reserve there is a lot of overcrowding. Does the community maintain a registry of vulnerable residents requiring evacuation assistance, such as elders, mobility limited individuals, young children? Yes. And again, if you want to populate some specifics about how the numbers of people, you're free to go in this section, and it will print out and analyze in your report. Does the community have records of fire incidents from the past 5 years? We'll put no. How many fires occurred in the community in past 5 years? You could make an assumption if you've got it off the top of your head, or you could put in the, a guess. or an estimate, right? If you wanted to just put in an estimate, and you could put 15, and you could put in here, this is an estimate, and the report will take that into account. Are fire-related deaths and injury statistics formally tracked by the community? This one, you would want to maybe do some work with your health department and find out. Maybe the nation doesn't track it, but maybe the health department does, or maybe through Indigenous Services Canada reporting it does. So we'll put yes for that. And has the community documented a written community fire safety profile or risk baseline, which is kind of like this assessment, right? And if you haven't, just put no, that's fine. It'll populate as a priority. So when you get into the next section, now we're going to start talking about governance and administration. So you'll see here as we move along, Tier 1 is 14% done. Overall progress is 9 out of 73, and our score is 5% based on where we're at. Does the community have a formal fire service policy or bylaw? That one, it could be yes, but if it's out of date, you want to consider that. So I would say if it's really, really out of date, I would tend to put no and put a note there and say, the last, if it's a BCR or policy was, approved by, chief and council in 2007, right? And make that note for it. Is there a designated fire chief or fire services coordinator? Put yes if you've got one. You could also put some information in here like, maybe if they're part-time, or if they're, maybe they're part-time, maybe they're full-time public works, part-time, whatever the case is, you can put that info. Does the fire department have a budget allocated by chief and council? Now, for this question here, you really want to kind of ask yourself whether there's an actual budget line item that is on the books. Because if you're just embedded in public works or infrastructure, or even, in some other department, if there isn't an actual budget line item for fire services, then you want to answer no to that. Is the fire department registered with the province or territory? If that's a requirement, it could depend on where you are, but technically they normally are, especially if that province or territory has like a fire marshal's office. Does the community have a mutual aid agreement with neighboring departments? So this could be in the form of mutual aid with a municipality for fire response. It could be through another First Nation. You can put yes or no. We're going to put no on this one. Are fire service expenditures tracked and reported to council? So again, this is where, whoever's doing the assessment wants to get complete clarity on this piece, because yeah, sure, if you go and buy some new equipment, maybe finance is tracking it, but are they actually putting it as a fire service expenditure, or is it just like a public works or a capital infrastructure expenditure? And you want it to be a fire service expenditure, and it should be reported to chief and council. And is there an Indigenous Fire Marshal's office relationship established? So this is more pertaining to, the province or territory, but it's something you'll want to know. All right, so you can see based on a lot of the yes questions for this tier where our score is climbing a little bit. Fire prevention and education. So are working smoke alarms installed in all occupied community dwellings? Well, if you don't really know, again, this is something that you could go through the community and do. This should be a priority within your community risk assessment and risk reduction efforts. If you have to make an educated guess, great. If you want to actually do a formal door knocking, that is even better. But for this one, we'll put some dwellings. Are smoke alarms inspected and tested annually? Let's put a no on that. Does the community deliver annual fire safety education and to residents? Sure. You could even put in, when those are held, where they're held, and what is some of the content for that. Are fire safety programs delivered in schools? Do you have fire safety coordinators or a fire chief or volunteers going around to schools, talking to youth, talking to students about fire safety? Does the community conduct fire home safety inspections? So again, this would be something that volunteer fire deputy fire chief could do. It's probably would be good to, if you can knock off 20 or 30 homes every quarter, whatever you have to do to break it up, just to make it easy. Are carbon monoxide alarms installed where required? That's very important too, and that's also part of the risk reduction efforts in your community. Is there a community burn permit or outdoor fire control system? This one would be pertaining to structural firefighting and just having some equipment in stock in the community in case they are, having a fire at a camp or doing dry meat or whatever it is. Is there a process in place in the nation to notify fire services that a fire burning activity is going to take place? Do community residents have written home escape plans? Not a lot do, so we're just going to put no or unknown for that. And again, this is all data you can capture when you're doing those home fire safety inspections. Does the community home inspection program use a structured checklist covering cooking, electrical, candle safety? Maybe, maybe not. Is electrical safety education program delivered to community residents? And does the community have a written community fire safety statement endorsed by chief and council? So this is also part of that governance piece, right? That kind of all fits into this tier 1 about risk, governance, and education. So again, you can kind of see we're moving up in the score here. You're starting to get some good data on where your on-reserve fire service levels might sit. Again, does the community track annual fire incident counts? And do you track fire-related deaths and injuries annually? So what this is saying is, again, do you track them as they occur? And then do you have a community review on an annual basis? Is smoke alarm coverage tracked as a percentage of all community dwellings? Right? And this is going to give you the baseline data and information that you require to look at the annual trends, right? Are you improving? So maybe not, but maybe once you start doing this and you can start to show progression in that story over the years, you'll start to see improvement. Is the percentage of households with a home escape plan tracked? Is the number of home safety inspections completed per year tracked? Is the number of fire prevention education sessions delivered and tracked per year? And have any of these baseline indicators been reported to chief and council or a funding body? Right? This is just getting your annual monitoring and baseline indicators for the level of community risk associated to structural fires established. So you can get into that annual routine of tracking and reporting. Hello, Shelly, thanks for joining us if that's you who's on here, or Jay, thanks for coming on. Now we're getting into tier 2, right? So our overall rate weighting for tier 1 is 24%. We're still at an overall 8% score for our performance level. Now we're going to get into how many trained firefighters are currently active. So, let's just go with 5, and you can put in here again what kind of training they've got in any of these fields. Are they trained to NFPA 1001 level or equivalent? Okay, we can put no formal training, so that populates in our report. Does the fire department conduct regular training exercises? Right? Do you do it monthly, quarterly, annually, rarely, or never? Are firefighters trained in first responder emergency medical? And this one, it would be more than just first aid. This is where you're getting into actual, EMT paramedic level. Is there a formal recruitment and retention program for your on reserve or community fire services? Are firefighters trained in wildland urban interface fighting? Right? This is a big one these days, especially for small remote communities outside forest protection zones or in very remote areas. You want to ensure that you have some baseline of wildland urban interface firefighting with some structural fire protection equipment in the community. And is there a succession plan for fire service leadership? So what happens when the fire chief or the deputy chief or any captains or volunteers leave? You want to make sure that there's a plan in place to hire them. So moving on into Tier 3, apparatus, personal protective equipment. Does the department have a pumper truck or primary fire apparatus? Right? Most communities do. You can kind of put in here the year, the make, the model of it, and that'll show up in your report. What is the age condition? Let's just say it's aging because you got it in 1995. A lot have. Does each firefighter have a complete set of NFPA compliant bunker gear? Right? We could put some are equipped. Do you have self-contained breathing apparatus? Right? Limited supply, adequate, or none? Is the apparatus and equipment on a regular maintenance and inspection schedule? Does the department have portable pumps or wildland firefighting equipment? And are communication devices like radios available for responding firefighters? So this is going to give you that baseline information and data on some of the personal protective equipment and equipment you need. Then we get into fire hall and water supply. So does the community have a dedicated fire hall or apparatus storage facility? A lot will, and it's, you're kind of dependent on the state of it. Some may not have heat, some may not have actual water supply at the fire hall, but you'll capture that as you go through. Right here, is it heated, secure, able to accommodate apparatus each year? And I would probably tend to, if it's heated in the winter with like a propane heater or some sort of makeshift heater, I would tend to put no, because that's not going to be adequate. So you might want to put in your comments here, the heating system is not adequate. Right? It's a propane or diesel generator fed, whatever, right? Capture that in here, because if you're feeling like that's an area where you need to go for funding, thanks for the likes there, appreciate that. You want to make that note. Is a reliable community water supply around for firefighting, either through fire hydrants, cisterns or static supply, tanker shuttling? Right? What do you have in the community for a stable water supply? We'll put cisterns and static supply here. Is the water supply accessible per year, including winter? Right? If you've got static cisterns out in the community and they're not insulated or heated, they're going to be freezing. So let's just put no. And is there a hydrant map or community water supply plan? That's where you would work and integrate with Public Works, right? To try and map all that out and get the right identification. So if first responders are having to respond and use those supplies, then you can go out and give everyone a map, all the new recruits a map, and they have all of the locations. And you can even go out and do pre-inspections. Now we're getting into operations and performance of the fire service, right? Does the fire department have written standard operating procedures? And even if you do, what state are they in? Are they 10 years old? Are they current? Are they accessible? Right? And you can put yes, but you might want to add a description. They were created in 2010 and not updated, right? You can make a note of that. Is there 24/7 emergency dispatch or call system for fire response? A lot don't have it. Are incident reports completed for all emergency responses? Is there a formal review and documentation of what the fire response was or what the call was about? We'll put no for that. What is the average response time? Right? And if you don't know, kind of just quickly go through your head and think, okay, if I got a phone call right now, how long would it take me to get from where I am to the fire hall with all of the other volunteers or staff outfitted and out the door and to, the furthest part of the community? Sometimes that can take 10 to 20 minutes if you're not full time. Does the department conduct post-incident analysis and debriefs? And is there a pre-incident plan for high-risk structures in the community, like the nursing station or health center, like the schools, like a community center or daycare, right? Even if you've got RCMP station, you should talk to them about if they catch fire, how are you going to manage that, as especially in case if they've got people in there or people in a prison cell or something like that. So again, you can kind of see as we're going through, the overall progress is being tracked. We're done 59 out of the 73 questions. We've got our tiers. We're at a 21% performance rating. Does the community have a community emergency management plan? Right, that's where you have to engage your emergency management program, right? Maybe you have one. Does it include specific fire response protocols? Okay, let's put no. And what we mean by that is, when you look at our EM program planning tool in this same app, we have a structural fire response annex for the emergency management plan. And if you have that, that's where you can flip it over to yes. Has the community completed a community wildfire protection plan? Put no. Is there an evacuation plan for all facilities? Right? Health, band office, public works building, whatever it is. Are they posted and regularly practiced through drills? Okay. Does the plan address vulnerable populations? Do you have specific considerations for elders, children, people with disabilities, hearing impaired, visually impaired, people that might be in a wheelchair? You've got to consider all of these things. Have you done a strength, weakness, opportunities, threat analysis for the current program? And does your community emergency management plan for fire safety address the community's top risk factors like older homes, overcrowding, poor egress, fly in, fly only? Maybe your winter roads are not forming as quickly or for as long as they used to. Is all of that considered? And the nice thing about this app is you also do some of this work in the hazard risk vulnerability assessment. All of those hazards and risks that you capture there cross-populate into this one. So again, you're only having to enter it in once. Okay, moving along into fire response services. Does the department have documented incident command system procedures, if that's what you use, or Blue Book, or whatever you use? Do you have them? If you've taken ICS, chances are you do. Are firefighters trained in basic technical rescue? And this can be water, swift water, search and rescue, vehicle extraction. I would say that in here, if they have some basic high priority ones, you put yes, and then you list exactly what you have. Does the community have a fire investigation program or access to a fire investigator through a fire marshal or their province or territory? Most probably will. This one's going to get really big, especially for ion lithium batteries, right? Is there a protocol for hazardous materials, especially as we start to see more ion lithium batteries coming into communities in terms of solar, right? Batteries, vehicles. If anyone in the community is crazy enough to get a Ford Lightning or an electric car on the res, or even for laptops and phones, storage capacity for some equipment, that is a huge issue. And I would say if you don't have these, that's going to be one area of focus that comes out of this report. Have you practiced multi-agency exercises with RCMP, the health center, paramedics, provincial wildland fire, other nations in your area? And is there a critical incident stress management program for firefighters? Okay. So once we complete that assessment, you can see right here, I already missed a question somewhere. Where did I miss a question? Fire safety planning. Oh yeah, does the plan address vulnerable populations? Let's put no. Okay, good catch. Check my homework. So there, we've got it. Now, what happens is you run the AI analyzer here. This can take 2 to 3 minutes, auto-populate. I'm going to say no to this one because those were done in other trainings and other contexts. So I'm just going to pretend that this is a standalone document and skip that. And this report is going to be based solely on what we did in this demo. And you can download it in Word and Excel. So if you need to freeform or add your nation's colors, your logo, whatever, copy and paste it, it's all going to be in there. So here you get an executive summary, that talks about the report. You get a little bit of a drill down in each tier. And then a dashboard of high priority, medium priority, low, and total recommendations with some identified strengths and some critical gaps. But it's the detailed recommendations where you get a lot of good information. So your high priority recommendations are update fire bylaws, procure structural firefighting PPE, and acquire pumper truck and wildland fire engine. So let's go on to and then the medium shows upgrade fire hall infrastructure, implement regular firefighting. So what this is doing is it's recommending based on the tiers, what's the biggest bang for your time and your money at this point? It's going to do fire bylaws first because it's not expensive work. It's stuff that you can do within your own nation processes. And those ones are going to establish a lot of the governance, right? And what you get here is you get some quick action steps, some funding recommendations, gives you a bit of a procurement guide. Like, so for example, legal services may be required with some consulting if you need it. And the impact here when you complete this is going to be high on your overall program. But where a lot of people like to look is let's get the equipment, right? So here you're going to get the safety of firefighters is of the utmost importance. Currently, there's a critical shortage on NFPA compliant structural gear, right? The impact here of implementing is 9 out of 10. Here's your action steps. And then here's a procurement guide based on your inputs of, what are some recommended specifications and the standards for the purchase of this equipment. So if you're going to get helmets, review NFPA 1971, right? That's the standard for the PPE equipment. So it gives you a little bit of insight on where to start looking. So if you do have to go out and purchase this stuff, or you do decide to bring in external support to help you develop your equipment list, if you're not a super experienced on-reserve fire chief or deputy, or you're a volunteer, at least you're going to have a little bit of guidance here to say, at least I can have a discussion with the contractor or consultant around what we're looking for so you don't get totally ripped off. And then around your pumper truck, right? NFPA 1901 and 1906 are what you would want to refer to when you're looking at fulfilling this one. And the impact on that's going to be at a 10. And same kind of thing. You get all of these action steps with the procurement guidance. And the nice thing is, so for example, let's just say you update all of your bylaws and policies. You go back to the assessment and you change all of these to yes, right? You go to your next section and you go back to your view your report and you reanalyze, okay? It's going to take into account those changes. And your report is going to be updated as fast as it goes here. You can see that the recommendations have been updated based on the new information we put into the assessment. So kind of ranked that we did all of the governance and policy for on-reserve fire services. That has now fallen off the high priority recommendations and is probably in, yeah, that will now show as complete. Right? Strong governance foundation was established, fire bylaws, policies, and a fire chief in place. So now it's restructured, right? We used to have 5 recommendations, but now we got 6 because what that has done is it's made room for some other lower priorities within developing standard operating procedures. So within a fire service, the governance and the budget and the finance is slightly ranked more important than having these standard operating procedures and pre-incident plans. Because if you don't have good governance and a budget through chief and council, you can have all the standing operating procedures you want, but if you don't have that buy-in at the leadership level, your fire service is not going to be successful. And it's more than just saying, you know, chief and council support the fire service. It's about having a band council resolution that's up to date, that identifies all of the positions within the fire service, right? You want all of that included. You're getting a bit of a training as well through these lives because it takes a little bit of the mystery out of what is an on-reserve fire assessment and how do you improve your on-reserve fire service levels, right? This kind of walks you through that process so you start to understand all of the things that you have to watch out for. And that does the same thing with all of the other assessments, like our community risk vulnerability assessment. You know, you actually start to learn about all the different hazard and risk classifications, how to analyze hazard exposure, vulnerability, and lack of coping capacity, link it with other hazards, and then you get these reports too. And again, like I said earlier, they all feed into each other. So that is about the gist of it. Yeah, and if you want, again, if you do catch the recording of this and you leave a comment and you want us to do more online tutorials and walkthroughs of this, please let me know. We're constantly looking at ways we can improve and kind of, you know, get people trained on these tools as a way to enhance their community emergency management. All right, well, that's it for me. I will be back tomorrow live streaming our daily situation report and likely doing some more overviews of these. So take care, know your hazardscape, and stay prepared. If you found this beneficial and you want others like you to come across it, please like and share this video so we can build up our community so we can get more people in here using it so more communities strengthen their emergency management program. Take care.